So thanks very much for coming today. I really appreciate that you've taken some time to learn about elder care, housing, and care. And today we're going to talk about the foundation and the life blueprint. My name is Amy Friesen, and I'm the founder and CEO of Tea and Toast. I've seen many familiar names tonight. So a lot of you have heard me speak before, but essentially at Tea and Toast, we really help people with the whole elder care journey in housing. So whether you want to stay home safe and know how to, some tips and tricks to do that, get some education on the industry for long-term care and retirement homes. And additionally, if you're looking to make a move to retirement or long-term care, we can also help you with that. And I also have a book out and we do courses. So there's a lot of material and education available at teaandtoast.ca. So today's journey, we're going to look at building the foundation for navigating the elder care journey in housing and a blueprint for living your best life while simultaneously helping others live theirs. Many people here, and no doubt, are caregivers. And so we're going to talk about ways to keep you safe and to ways to be able to still have your own life while being a caregiver. And so what I thought I'd start with tonight are some stats, and these are roughly within the last 20 years. So just to give you a perspective of elder care, of the journey that many people are taking, currently there's approximately 7 million seniors in Canada. And of particular interest, the 90 plus population over the last number of years is growing 145%. So that's pretty interesting material because, as you can expect, as we all get older, most of us will need care. And if there's this kind of influx in the 90 plus population, there's going to be a lot more people needing care, but at the same time. Also, there's approximately 2.2 million caregivers who are also employed, which means that they are going to work and have their 9 to 5s or whatever hours they're doing, and they're also being caregivers at the same time. Now, this didn't happen as much years and years ago when more people were in the home still. They were able to care for their loved ones at home, or at least have a bit more time. This is not overly what's happening right now. A lot of people that we see are juggling work, they're juggling caregiving for their loved ones and their parents. And then the other piece of that is 1/4 of all mothers right now, new mothers, are an average age of 35. And I bring that up because this means that demographic is probably right within the sandwich generation, which means that not only are these caregivers, they're also employed, so they're working, but they're also sandwich generation, which means they have younger kids that are counting on them as well as their aging parents, for instance, or their aging loved ones. And the strain of that on everybody in society in general is a lot. It can be quite a lot. So I like to bring people's attention to these types of stats so that you can kind of understand as a whole what's happening, because it'll help you understand when we talk about long-term care and whatnot, wait lists and things like that. There's just so many more people that are looking for the same services, that we've never actually had this many seniors looking for housing and home care and all of the stuff. So I think it's of particular importance for tonight's discussion. Now, seniors and their care needs, I've just pulled out a couple of interesting things. So again, seniors are living longer and they're having advancing care needs, which would happen to any of us. The longer we live, the more likely we're going to need more care and for a longer time. There's simply just not enough care in the system currently. And the silos between private and public care communication are really thick, which means when the hospital or HCCSS is talking to clients, there's a little bit of a silo there to get information. And then when private business is talking to clients, trying to get the information to cross over for the client that's in the middle can be really difficult. And so there's large silos, mostly coming from the public side, to be honest. And so that's a big problem. Additionally, there's just not enough education to navigate the system. It's just not as readily available. I know if you've been on our site, we do our best to educate and put as much stuff on there, but it's not the usual. And so it's really difficult for families. Now, caregivers, there's not enough hours in a day currently. There's not enough downtime for caregivers. You're running from one thing to another. And if you're a sandwich caregiver, you're running to even more things. They're having difficulty balancing work with new uncharted caregiving scenarios. They've never been a caregiver, for instance, if maybe they're not a sandwich generation, but they're caring for a senior loved one, and they've just never really done that role before. So trying to figure that out while you're in the throes of it. And there's difficulty managing the increased and foreign emotions. So we're talking about stress, we're talking about increased fatigue, and a big one would be guilt. And a lot of caregivers, they are going through situations where they have a tremendous amount of guilt. But I would tell you that a lot of people don't recognize that it's guilt. We definitely, when we're talking to people, we talk about it all the time, but a lot of people don't realize that it is guilt. And you're also in mourning when you're going through this kind of information and these transitions, especially when larger transitions start to happen, like family homes get sold and people move to retirement or long-term care. Like, you're mourning as a caregiver a lot because you're letting go of some stuff that you might have known all your life, and your loved ones are changing and their needs are changing, and everything in between. So I think it's valuable to share these insights. So on the Eldercare journey of housing and care, I say there's 6 steps. Tonight, we're going to look at the foundation, which is understanding the options available and the terminology. And then we'll switch over to the self-assessment, that life blueprint, really figuring out how to care for yourself as a caregiver. So firstly, what we're going to talk about is care path planning, which means that it's really important to have a strategy in this time of your life or of your loved one's life, so that not only are you educated on what next steps might be, but mostly that you don't get caught in a crisis. So consider that, when we're talking about home care, when we're talking about moving to retirement homes, when we're talking about long-term care, many people have never had to do that. When I look back in my family, I had one great grandma in a nursing home or long-term care home when I was around 9. And our family hasn't had to deal with it since. And so that's like decades of time that's gone by. And so until, things become generational and more people have gone through it, then people really don't have the greatest understanding of how the system works. And that's why it's so important to arm yourself with education. And so lots of people choose to stay home for as long as possible. I will tell you that a lot of those people also say, I'm going out feet first. I don't need to plan. I don't need to have a strategy. And I would tell you that if your plan is to stay at home for as long as possible, you are absolutely in need of a plan, because honestly, if you don't plan, those are the folks that end up in crisis and they end up in hospital, and then their choices are taken. And so lots of people are staying home. They're staying home longer. They're bringing in care. They're doing renovations. All is great as long as people are safe. And then from there, choices need to be made, right? As care needs increase, as different things happen, people start choosing different things. So either they stay home, they bring in care, their family caregivers come in, like their daughters and sons and whatnot, and they exist there. Or a lot of people choose to move from their home to a retirement home, which we will get into and I'll explain. And then sometimes from there, some people decide to move from retirement to long-term care. There's lots of people, because we're very fortunate in Ottawa to have a lot of homes that can do high care. There's lots of people that do stay in retirement until eventually they, pass away down the line, but for the rest of their lives. And so they don't need to move to long-term care. Their budgets allow, the care levels allow it in the home that they're at. But then others, for various reasons, choose to move to long-term care. They are waiting on the waiting list, their number comes up and they make a move. Now, people also move from home to long-term care as well. We'll get into it in a little bit about long-term care and wait lists and all that. But those are the roughly the kind of the pattern, the two different ways of things happening. And know that your home in this instance could be your family home, the one you've been living in for 50 years. It also could just be with a loved one, with a daughter, with a son, whomever, equally just like your home. And then the other ones would be considered more congregate living, like more facilities. So as you start on this journey, a lot of people tell me, I don't speak the language of the hospital. I don't know what the retirement homes are talking about. I'm really overwhelmed and quite stressed out. And so the whole purpose of showing you what the foundations are is to educate you in terminology that is being used as you age, as all of us age, that this terminology is being used around you all the time. And at the end of the day, they're also using acronyms all the time. And sometimes I can't even keep up, and I do this all day long, every day. And so I'm going to go through some of the definitions and terminology so that you have a better idea of what's happening. If you're in hospital and you have care needs and they're talking about IADLs, which we're going to talk about, or ADLs, or two-person transfers and all of that stuff, then you know a little bit more about what they're talking about. You're just more informed to make those educated decisions. And so first we're going to talk about independent activities of daily living. So IADLs. These are activities that you learn mostly in your teen years. And so you can see here things like managing shopping and meal preparation, home maintenance, cleaning, finance, transportation, communication, and managing your meds. Now, these things, generally speaking, are some of the first items and pieces that individuals require some assistance with as they age. And a lot of times what I see is that family caregivers will start to take over or start to do with their loved ones things like shopping or meal prep, or driving to more appointments, or getting dosets for medications, sometimes finance. So the family caregivers often jump in here, and that's usually where I see things start. In contrast, the activities of daily living, which are ADLs, are things that we learn when we're younger. So like it says here, things like personal care, getting dressed, managing your appearance, bathing and showering, ambulation, which is walking, getting around, going to the washroom, using the toilet, and also cleaning yourself appropriately, feeding yourself, and transferring, meaning getting from one surface to another. Like if you're going to transfer out of a bed to a wheelchair, or transfer to a walker, or get onto the toilet. And so these things are learned when we're really young. And as you can see, these are more physical care needs. The IADLs are a bit more mental, I would say, or a bit more task oriented. These are physical care needs. They could also be considered task oriented, but just in a different way. And so when people start to need these things, generally speaking, they either have family caregivers or spouses or partners help take care of some of that, or they bring in some home care, either private or public, which we'll talk about, or they start looking into retirement and long-term care. Or some of them, struggle through for a while, to be honest. Like, it happens that not everybody does seek help, but generally that's what I see. So retirement living, I like to classify it as a social model. Retirement homes are there for a couple of reasons. One, they really help kind of manage or get rid of a little bit of the social isolation, because you're living amongst peers. You're doing things in common spots, like you're doing activities. you're doing dining services and things like that. So the idea is that people are around you to talk to play cards, do things like that, and try to keep you a bit more social. And they also have things included, like all of them have housekeeping and meal services included. You're in your own private suite. And you can get, usually in retirement, depending on the home, you can get anywhere from a studio, which is a small room, to a 1-bedroom, to a 2-bedroom. And you're kind of the suite your choice based on budget. Now, the retirement homes here in Ottawa do a lot of care. I would tell you that a lot of the homes here have increased their care since COVID. And that's good for our community because the waiting lists are so long in long-term care, which I'll touch on. And so the important thing to know is that, yes, more of the homes, the retirement homes, can do care, but they are not all created equal. So not all of them can do it. And this is why researching your options, knowing what you want for here in this time period and down the way as you age in place at a retirement home, so that you can make those educated decisions. A lot of the retirement homes here in Ottawa have a memory care floor, which is essentially a secured floor that folks with cognitive impairment, dementia, different things, it doesn't have to be dementia, but most often it is, can live on that floor. So if you have a loved one that has dementia that is exit seeking, which means trying to get out and not happy to stay at the same, indoors or in the same spot, especially if they're very physically well, the secured floor may come into conversation at that point. The secured floor is also really beneficial for someone who may require a lot of queuing, like a lot of hands-on. It just depends on their own situation. And sometimes people move to memory care because they have a specific diagnosis. And so, depending on the dementia you have, some are a bit more physical. And instead of making a move again when the dementia increases, people sometimes choose to just start on the memory care floor because they, can forecast that they will need a bit more services. And they're also privately owned. So that just means that they're private pay, it's your own budget, there's very little subsidy. In Ottawa, there's a couple of subsidized homes, but they're through the Ottawa City Housing, and so they're a bit different, the way that they work, and they don't often do a ton of care. So for retirement, the other terminology that's really important to know is how they package care. And so there's two main ways. Some homes do a combination, but the two main ways are a la carte care and package care. Now, a lot of people have this myth that, if they do a la carte care and my loved one needs medications 4 times a day, the home's going to charge every single time they do meds, or every single time they come for a call bell or whatever it is. So the idea of the a la carte is that you work with the home and the director of care to establish your own personalized package, because not everybody's the same. And so you may need medications and bathing, and the next person may need all of this list. And so the pricing is going to vary. And so essentially what they do is they create a package for you, personalized, and then that's a monthly charge. And so if you need more care, they reevaluate, they have a conversation with you, and then they'll add on more care that adds into the monthly fee. Or say you don't need as much care, then they will again evaluate it, have a conversation, and they'll subtract it, and that'll be your new monthly fee. So the other really nice thing about the a la carte packaging, depending on how much you care, how much care you need, and again, everybody's different. The nice thing also is that when people are using HCCSS, the Home and Community Care Support, or the LIN or CCAC, all the same thing. Again, we'll talk about it in just a sec. When they're using that at home, they can come into the retirement homes. And if you choose an a la carte home, then the services that the HCCSS is providing can mostly continue in retirement, and then the retirement home doesn't have to do it for you, and therefore they don't charge for it. And so it can save you some money on that side. In the package care side, if you have the same thing happen, package care is the package and there's no reductions. And so many people have the HCCSS come in and they do their certain care, and the home does not duplicate, they do other care, or they put time towards other care, but you don't get a refund or you don't get a rebate because HCCS is coming in. And so that's one of the important things to know about the two care styles. Package care is also really good for different types of clients, like both have their place. If you're somebody that needs a lot of care, a package care situation may be a good situation. So everything is included, you know, and you don't have to worry about it. It's going to be the same price every time. You can budget for it. Whereas if you're someone who didn't need as much care, in a package care situation, you could be faced with the fact that you're paying for a bunch of care that you don't actually need. So all this to say is a la carte and package care benefit people differently, and it's all about the strategy. And this is why what we do with our clients is we teach them how to do this, and we help them figure out which homes are best, because it's really important, especially because retirement is not inexpensive. And so really making the most of your money, making sure you have all the care in place, and making sure you're comfortable with those monthly bills, then that's really going to add to your experience in retirement living, and hopefully in a positive way, just to get everything sorted. This is an example of some retirement home financials. A lot of people ask me, and so just to give you some high level costs, again, depending on your own situation, this will look different. But a studio suite, so somewhere between 250 square feet to 400 square feet, probably one room with a bathroom, with no care, is going to run somewhere between $2,500 and $4,000 in Ottawa. And the studio suite, the same suite, but with maximum care, can run up to $9,000. So, you know, depending on the care level. Other considerations are second occupant, parking, phone, cable, internet. You also need tenant insurance. And then I just put care at the bottom to give you that large ballpark. And so these are some of the things you need to take into consideration for your budgeting needs, to make sure that you can cover them off when you're looking for retirement. So you have to add the suite size to get the suite size, the amount of care, if there's a second occupant, and any of those extra things like parking and cable, tenant insurance things. Now, long-term care, in contrast, I consider a medical model. And so I say medical model because it's more similar to a hospital setting. It says here that long-term care has the higher care levels. And what that means is that if you are an independent senior who doesn't need any care, or you need very little care, such as just medications, you most likely won't be qualified to get into long-term care. You have to hit a threshold of how much care you need. They also have memory care. Again, not every home is created equal. A lot of the homes in general have a secured entrance, like a front door. And then a lot of homes on top of that have a secured floor, just for your information. The waiting lists in Ottawa are substantial. They could go anywhere from a couple of months, which is sort of rare, all the way up to 8 years. And so that's why it's really important to have a strategy and a plan, because if you're waiting to get into long-term care, you could be waiting for a while, and it might not be safe for you to be at home. And so what is the plan? And then also, just to touch on it, long-term care are run privately and publicly. and they essentially are subsidized through the government at the same rate, and so the costs are going to be the same. We'll talk about that in just 1 second. We've talked about this before, but the long-term care homes in home care through the government is all done through the home and community care support services. So HCCSS, also known as the LIN, was known as CCAC. It can be very confusing. And they are essentially the keepers of the long-term care list. They will do the assessments for home care. And so home care is very much similar to long-term care in such that you have to qualify and you need to have some needs to do that. Some people are trying to be proactive to get on the long-term care list when they're independent, which I applaud, but it's not as easy because they're not really qualified to do that. So it's hard to make that extra plan, but there's other strategies you can put in around that to make sure that you're a bit more prepared. So the cost for long-term care, so just a note that when you go to long-term care, their room is furnished where it's not in retirement. In retirement, you bring your own furniture. In long-term care, there's a hospital bed, there's a side table, there's a chair, for instance. All of your personal items, such as toilet paper, Kleenex, and everything's included, including sanitary products such as Depends and incontinence things. So all of that's included. The only really pluses are the phone, cable, internet, and things like hairdressing and things like that. And so in the basic room, that would be 2 beds in a room. Before COVID, it could have been up to 4 for the quads. But now they have abolished that. And so now there's only a maximum of 2 per room, which is great for people in general. It's hard on the system, I will say, because that deleted about 800 beds in the province. And that with the wait list being so high is pretty problematic. So the basic room is the room that you are going to receive extra subsidy in. So if you can't afford long-term care, they will evaluate that. And then if the government is going to do the extra subsidy, they will essentially kind of take the money that you have coming in. They'll give you essentially an allowance of about $150, and you would live in a basic room with another occupant. Basic rooms all across the province standardized around $19.86 a month. Semi-private room, also 2 people in that room, and there's no subsidies in that room, and that's $23.95. And then private room is 1 person, and it's around $28.38. Well, not around, it's exactly $28.38.49. So this is some information about care levels, and I'm going to describe them to you so that you have a bit of an idea of what retirement homes can handle, what long-term care homes can handle, and what to expect. So independent living. You're an independent senior, you're moving in, you don't need any care services, and essentially you've chosen perhaps to move into a retirement home for the socialization. Maybe you don't want to do your home maintenance anymore, maybe shopping is not your thing anymore, meal prep, for all those great reasons. Lots of people move as independent seniors. And so independent seniors, that is a retirement home term. It does not apply in long-term care. You cannot move to long-term care, generally speaking. There might, obviously there's always, exceptions, but generally as an independent senior, you won't be able to apply for long-term care. Supportive is very similar to independent, but supportive is you're needing all the same things, but you need some timed or routine tasks such as medications 3 times a day, a bath a couple times a week, that type of things that the staff can schedule and come to, as opposed to you ringing the pendant or calling down and asking for services or it being more sporadic. Again, supportive living isn't necessarily something they do in long-term care. It's more of a retirement home term. Physical care. Now we're getting to the crossover. This will be in long-term care and retirement. And physical care essentially means that someone needs to help you complete your ADLs, your activities of daily living. And if someone doesn't help you, then that activity will not be completed, such as if you're in a wheelchair and you need to transfer from the bed to a wheelchair and you can't do it on your own, someone needs to help you. The two terms in here are one person assist, meaning one person, like a PSW, can kind of hoist underneath your arm and guide you and help you up. And the second term is a two-person transfer, and that just means that two people need to help you. And again, not all retirement homes are equal. Some provide two-person transfers, some don't. And again, a reason to make a strategy, especially if you're dealing with things like Parkinson's or MS, things that might down the way inhibit your physical being and you need more help. That's definitely something to pay attention to. That, like I said, is in long-term care as well. Memory care, again, in both retirement and long-term care, as we talked about this before, but there's a secured floor. People that live on the secured floor usually have some form of dementia. I have seen others with just cognitive issues from car accidents and things like that. It's a supportive environment. Memory care usually has its own activity calendar that is for cognitive stimulation. So it's a different activity calendar. People that live on the memory care floor are always welcome to come to activities outside of that floor. They just need to be escorted by a staff member. And the idea of that floor is to maintain their safety, make sure everybody is happy and well taken care of, and that their needs are met as quickly as possible. So after we've learned about the foundation, I'm hoping that really gave you indeed a foundation of kind of the education surrounding elder care housing. I know that it's a lot, but really what the idea is to get you thinking about, okay, well, what if this happened to me, or what if this happened to my parents? The second part that we're going to talk about today is the self-assessment, which is what I call the blueprint. And it's how to take inventory of your emotions and your personal situation so that you as a caregiver also take care of yourself. We've all heard the term in the airplanes, when the masks come down, you put the mask on yourself, because essentially if you can't keep yourself afloat and you can't keep yourself going, then you're not going to be helpful to anybody. And I know that many of you have probably heard that. So the idea behind this section here is to teach you some skills and tips and tricks to really, hopefully, better enable you to get some things done so that you don't lose yourself while you're a caregiver. So briefly, I'd like to put some thoughts out there, because there's a lot of people that have caregiver burnout. There's a lot of people that have been there, that have come out of it. There's a lot of people going there right now, and some of you might be burnt out as we speak. And caregiver burnout can be from multitude of reasons. I will tell you that I myself have been burnt out before. It's not a pleasant place to be, and honestly, it sneaks up on you very, very quickly, and then all of a sudden you're there. And so to be preemptive and to plan to not get there, or to plan as much as you can to not get there, is really advantageous, so that you don't have to deal with that. And also the caregivers that do burn out, they may be caregiving for instance, like for a spouse or a partner, and that spouse or partner may have something. They may have a dementia diagnosis, they may have Parkinson's, they may have MS, they may really be counting on you as a partner. And honestly, if you burn out, and that's the situation that you guys have set up, if you burn out, they're going to be in trouble, right? So so these are some of the things that cause burnout. So financial stress can cause people to burn out. Can we afford retirement? Can we afford to stay home? How do we do this? Expectations, especially between partners and spouses, what is one expecting of the other one, can be very troublesome. And also on children of seniors, what are they expecting for you? What type of time do they expect you to be involved? Things like that. Legal, there's definitely disputes. There's people that don't have powers of attorney done, there's people that don't have wills done and paperwork, and it's very stressful and very time consuming. And if you're in a situation where you're caring for someone that has dementia, for instance, there's probably a time limit, because especially for someone who has dementia, if they're deemed incompetent, then whatever power of attorney that's on file, even if there isn't one, is set in stone. Essentially, they can't change it because they don't have the mental faculties to do that. So that can be very stressful. I talked to a lot of people about that. So living arrangements, where do we go? How do we do it? How much does it cost? What are we gonna get up to on that? Mental health, again, caring for someone with dementia can be very draining. And just handling those emotions of like anxiety and stress. A lot of people feel isolated as caregivers, and really just all in that aspect. And then another thing is end of life. No one wants to talk about end of life. It's very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but navigating the planning of that, having the conversations can even be really stressful. So all of this stuff can lead to or cause caregiver burnout. Depends how long you're dealing with it, depends on the scope. So it's just some things to think about. And like I said, a lot of people don't realize that that's where they're going, and then all of a sudden they hit the wall, and it's just they can't do anything after that. So it's really important to take care of yourself. Okay, so the life blueprint is all about time management, stress management, and self-care management. So I'm going to talk about time management first. And again, this is just to give you some things to think about. This is to give you some strategies. And so really where we're at is with time management, there's 3 areas that I focus on. One is time boundaries. And what I mean by time boundaries is, for instance, if you're caring for your loved one and you say, Mom, I can only come and visit you to help after work until 7 p.m. because then I have to go home and, put my daughter to bed or whatever it is. And putting these time boundaries in allows you to really make sure that not only are you caring for yourself and what your limits are, but also not to always be pushing over your limits. I know for myself, I need a certain amount of downtime, or I'm no good to anyone. And so putting those time boundaries in really help with that. Scheduling personal time is all about scheduling your own time physically in your calendars. A lot of us use our calendars quite a bit, and a lot of people don't take the next step to put something in for themselves. Now, most people have little problem with saying, I have a medical appointment, I have an eye appointment, I got to go to the dentist, and those things get in because they're appointments, they're with professionals, they're important. What I'm challenging you here to do is actually schedule time to do whatever you need, whatever you want. No one's judging you. No one sees your calendar but yourself. If you need to schedule an hour because you like to read and you haven't read in 4 months, then schedule the time so that you're blocking it. And this really comes in handy when sometimes caregivers are running back and forth from their parents' house, running all over town, doing groceries, doing all this stuff. And they lose all their time because they're looking, and it's like, okay, work ends and then all this time's open. So you just kind of randomly cram everything into it. So the idea is to really section it off so that you have a bit more control over your own schedule and that your schedule is not running you. For batching, I don't know if anybody's heard of batching, but it's essentially, it's a way to put like items together. And so using the grocery example, if you're doing groceries for your loved one and your own house, what is the strategy that you're not going to the grocery store or other related errands 6 times a week? You're doing it 1 to 2 times a week. And so, batching would be, okay, I'm going to make my grocery list, and Mom and Dad, you make your grocery list, send it to me, give it to me. And then make a master list so you know what you need, and plan the trip to go to the grocery store 1 time a week or 2 times, depending on what it is that you're doing. And then this really kind of compartmentalizes it in, so then you're not wasting the time switching between tasks all the time and only getting a certain amount of things and then running out of time because you have to do this. It's really about, again, controlling your schedule, freeing up the time, because remember, you got to drive to the stores, you got to drive around town. Some people drive to their parents right afterwards. And so what I'm suggesting is put it in a compartment. You know, maybe you don't make an extra trip to your parents. Maybe you were already going to go on Wednesday night. So maybe you go grocery shopping Wednesday before you see your parents, as opposed to, I'm going to go groceries on Monday because I was going to go for my family. I'll just go to do that for my family on Tuesday. I'll go for mom and dad, but then I'll make an extra stop on Tuesday and then I'll go and see them on Wednesday. It's a lot, right? So, you know, for those folks that are working and they have young ones at home that they're caring for and a family and they're doing stuff, really making the most of your time. All of us only have 24 hours, so it's really important. So for stress management, the two things that I like to focus on here are creating habits and routines and setting personal space boundaries. Habits and routines are things that you have running in the background that you don't need to think about. So consider brushing your teeth. Most of us have been in the habit of brushing our teeth twice a day. At this point, we just do it. It's just a part of our nightly routine, for instance. And then, you know, maybe you have a skincare routine, or maybe you do something else, or maybe you always shower in the morning or always shower at night. And those are the routines, and the habits kind of form underneath them. And so the purpose of doing this is for a couple of reasons. You know, one, habits and routines are often, you know, focused on you because they're your habits or your routines. That's how you run your life. And so they're really important to keep you centered and take care of you, because a lot of the, you know, night routines is like for, you know, taking off makeup and washing your face and brushing your teeth and doing whatever. It's really about you as a person and caring for yourself. But these things are often the first to go when people are stressed, right? Like I've many a time myself, it's been a long night and I just throw all of my night routine to the wind. I brush my teeth and that's about it. And I go to bed. Like I'm done. And so it's really important to keep these things as routine as possible so that you're caring for yourself and your body. And the other thing is that if you get pulled off track, if you go on a vacation, if you have a crisis with your loved ones or other members of your family that you're having to address and you're not home and you're doing other things, when things start to settle, or you come back from vacation or whatever it is, you can easily jump back into those routines because they're already established. And then you can get back in your own daily routines, and it just creates a little bit of a balance in your life. Setting personal space boundaries. I always like to use the thought that myself, I'm not a hugger. So, you know, if I'm going through something personally that's mentally draining, a lot of you again are caregivers, and it's a lot of like intensity. And some of us handle it better than others. And so for me, when I'm going through that, I am not a super touchy-feely person. I don't like a lot of hugs. And so if I was going through that and my husband went to hug me, it would be too much. It would be almost like too much, you know, personal touch at that point, right? So setting those space boundaries, the personal boundaries, whatever that is for you, the section is really to say it's okay to do that. You know, it's your personal space, it's your body, you know, you're allowed to kind of run the space around it. And if somebody's doing something that's not being helpful, it's not making you feel comfortable, then speak up and claim your space is kind of what I'm saying here. Because then, you know, on the other side, if you don't, it'll cause extra stress. Like if my husband didn't stop hugging me for whatever reason, or if he went to do it and I said, no, thank you, you know, if he did it, then it would just be causing me stress and not helping me. And that's kind of the analogy I use, just to give you a bit of a visual. Hopefully you're all huggers, but, you know, generally speaking, that's just, you know, one I use. And then self-care management is about being in tune with your physical and mental needs, and the ability to evaluate your needs while putting processes into place to achieve it. So For mental, it's about making time for caring for your mind. Are you doing meditation? Are you just taking some breaths? Are you taking a minute? Social is about cultivating relationships. Again, I like to use myself as a personal example. Like, I am not very outgoing, and so I have to make an effort to be social because I know it's important. And all of us went through COVID and we all had the social isolation, and so I think we all learned a bit about that. And so that's really important. And it doesn't have to be relationships with everyone. It just needs to be a couple of good relationships, some people that you really like to be with. Physical, about taking care of your body. This doesn't mean the gym 2 hours a day. This means whatever works for your schedule, some sort of movement, a dog walk, a brisk walk, something, anything really. Spiritual is about your life experience and your purpose. It also can mean religion, but more so is like, what's your purpose in life? Like, what do you want to do? We all only have one life, and let's make it meaningful. Let's make it count. So really, what is your purpose through your life? And emotional is about your coping skills. So a lot of us are running high on stress, especially caregivers. There's a lot of things going on. How are you coping with that? Do you have skills put in place? Is your coping skill wine, for instance, right? Lots of people like to drink wine. I like my wine, but is it a coping skill? Is that what you're putting, is that what you're using to deal with the emotional stuff? And if so, maybe you look at it for your own health and make sure that you're taking care of your own health. So to finish up, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the talk. So the talk is everything that happens everything happens in and out of a conversation. And so I have a workshop called The Talk, and really what it's about is the recipe for how to have these complicated, weird conversations with people, because a lot of people don't want to talk about end of life planning, and they don't want to talk about what if I become incapacitated, and what if I have to move, and about money and all those awkward things. And so just so you know, when you're talking with your loved ones, or when you're thinking about, what conversation should I be having? This is the general idea. This is what's covered in the workshop, but just to get you thinking, things like the financial talk, expectations, the mental health, physical health, living arrangements, legal, and end of life. Similar things that we had talked about before, but these are really the 7 conversations that I've identified that come up mostly in elder care planning. And they're ones that have impact, right? So if like you have a loved one and you're a family caregiver, and you don't know anything, if you're responsible for caregiving, but you don't know anything about the finances, then you don't know how you can help them, and you don't know what they can afford. Or for instance, the living arrangements, my mom and dad won't talk to me about living arrangements. So what do I do if they need that? So these are the things that workshop helps with, but these are also the things that we talked about previously in the caregiver burnout section. So just something to have a look at. For more information, you can definitely go to teaandtoast.ca, and there's definitely information on there. And I always say, be brave enough to start the conversation. It's awkward. No one likes to have these awkward conversations. Elder care is hard. The journey can be difficult, but opening up the conversations and talking to people, including your peers, because lots of people are going through the same thing and they just don't talk about it. Short of that, using a professional and talking to them will open up, the lines of communication, and hopefully get, your loved ones talking with you about what they'd like to do and what their plans are. And then you guys can have a little bit of a less stressful go of the elder care journey and enjoy it a little bit more, because honestly, it is a journey. It's the next step, next stage. And I always a believer that it doesn't need to be as hard as a lot of people make it be, but it's mostly down to communication. And so that's what I'll leave you with tonight. So does anybody have any questions before we finish tonight? If you do, please put them in the comment box and I will address them. And then just while we wait here to see if anybody has any questions, this is just a QR code. If you would like to book a 30-minute strategy session with Kayla, she can just talk about your situation. And either she may be able to direct you if you need certain resources, or if you need one of our services and help with us, she can direct you to that. As I mentioned, there's a lot of free education on tientos.ca. There's a lot of material there that you can go through, and this webinar will also be posted there. You'll get an email, but I do invite you to, really go through the site and use it as a tool. And if you have questions while you're on there, just shoot us an email and ask us, and I'm sure we can take care of it. Or, as I like, because I am the one that develops the content, if you have an idea for content, if there's something that you need an answer to, or something it took you a long time to learn and you think it would be valuable, just send me an email. Go to the contact page and just send us an email, and I'd be really happy to hear that. Okay, so we have a couple things going. Oh, thanks very much, Vicky. I appreciate that. So how can we see the replay? So the replay will be posted should be posted by Friday, if not the weekend, on tientos.ca/webinars with an S. There's also a drop-down menu on the website. It'll be posted there, and I will send you out the email that'll have the link in there as well. Let's see here. Just checking my understanding. There are basically 2 tiers of post-home living. There's retirement homes and long-term care. Did I get that correct? Yes. So essentially, in Ontario, those are the 2 we have. I mean, there's always the gray zone, of living with families, which we talk to as kind of in your own home still. There's different types of group homes that may or may not fit. They're usually for younger folks. They're not necessarily geared for seniors. There is a trend that's more so in Europe that people are talking about here, called Golden Girl housing, which means a couple of seniors get together and essentially share a house and share the care. It's not taken off here a super amount. I've heard of it throughout the years, but not super substantially. I will tell you, in the retirement home portion, there's buildings that can do all the care. They can do, a variety of care. And then there's buildings under the same kind of portfolio of retirement living that just offer independent care. So if you're, for instance, a single person or a couple or whatnot, and you're thinking, Amy, I'm independent, but I don't really want to move into more of a care building, but I don't want to stay at my house. What's the option? Well, they're in retirement living here. There's still retirement homes that have full kitchens and apartments that you can still do that. The added benefit is that a lot of them, you can partake in the social. You can still partake in some of the meals, services if you want to. And they also have, staffing available more so. It's like I said, it's independent on the other side. It won't be exactly like retirement, but there is different options available. But in the formalized type of housing situation and system, it's really retirement and long-term care. Okay. For individuals on disability, does the subsidy get applied to long-term care private rooms? How much does family need to make shortfall for long-term care or retirement private rooms? So I've dealt with people, I don't know if I know the 100% answer, but I can follow up with you. I've dealt with people that have been on ODSP, and I think that's what you're talking about. And they use that money in retirement. It hasn't been a problem. I think it's a little bit of a process, but that's not been an issue. I'm not sure how it applies for long-term care though. I haven't actually been asked that question before, and it's a really good question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture that question, and I'm going to look into it, and I'll get right back to you once I can find an answer for you. Okay, so I mentioned a wait list for long-term care. Are there typical wait times for retirement living as well? Great question. So, retirement living after COVID looks different. I will tell you that I've been in this industry for 20 years, and nobody count the years over there. I've been in the industry for 20 years, and essentially I have never seen this type of wait list situation happen in retirement. And what I mean by that is, if you're independent, if you're an independent senior and you don't need any services, there's plenty of room. No problem finding retirement living, not an issue. If you're someone that needs an assisted living floor, meaning that some buildings have an actual floor dedicated where they have a nursing station, they do heavier care, and some do it throughout the building. So the assisted living floors and the memory care floors are starting to get wait lists at some homes. I will tell you that we work with a lot of families every year, and we are still able to find availability and occupancy, but it is getting a lot more challenging, and sometimes the family can't get exactly what they need because of the availability, and they might be in a crisis and they might not be able to wait a month or whatnot or make that work. And so they have to maybe select a different type of home. That doesn't mean that the home can't do the care, it's just maybe not their top choice. And so that being said, those waiting lists are becoming more and more real at this point. And so one of our strategies is, if you're an independent senior or you require less care and you're interested in moving into retirement, then the idea would be we find a suitable home that can do care down the way, depending on your own personal situation. And then you would move in as an independent person, and because you're a resident, you would be an internal move, which means that you would get first kick at the can. So if you need to move to an assisted living floor, you would be one of the top options before they move people from outside. Okay. Great questions, everyone. How many hours of home care can one get? Does a senior have any say concerning the caregiver assigned, for example, male or female? I believe that you could put in requests. I can't tell you that it's 100%, but I would suspect that you could put in requests. Absolutely, with home care, private home care, you can. It's not as easy with the governmental home care. The amount of care someone gets is dependent on a lot of factors. I can tell you what I've seen. Because so if you're in the community in your own home or a loved one's home, for instance, and receiving HCCSS, it's more than just care services that you can get. You can get access to companion care, you can get some other stuff that you can't get in retirement. And so to skip that for just a second, to say in retirement homes, what I often see people get are the services of AM care, meaning helping them get up in the morning, get around, clean up for the day, get dressed. PM care, which is the reverse of that, getting them ready for bed, and bathing assistance, right? So a couple times a week, they have someone come in and help them with a bath or a shower. And so that care exists that you can get in the retirement home. So I've definitely seen people get all of that for 7 days a week. It's usually somewhere between 15 and 21 hours. That also can happen in your own home. But I would suggest that sometimes there is other care that can be done. But I will tell you that the HCCSS is a moving target, and it's really hard to nail down. It changes so rapidly, just like the waiting list, that I couldn't give you 100%, but I will tell you that I have seen people get 21 hours, which is essentially a couple hours a day. And I also would tell you that it's a little bit more difficult in the community when you're at your own home, to get consistency, to get people to show up all the time. I mean, I'm sure that some of you have heard that before, but in a retirement home, it's a congregative care, which means that the caseworker, the PSWs and whatnot, are already in the home servicing them, and so they service a bunch of people, and so they're there, and so it's a bit more reliable. So that's a piece of information that might be helpful as well. Oh, keep the questions coming. Great questions. Let me see here. How to find a reputable company to help secure retirement? Well, I would hope that you would call us, Joan. So tea and toast is, I think, is what you're asking. So what we do when you're looking for a retirement home, is we are very holistic in our approach. And so what we really do is we figure out what's important to you as a person, who's important that needs to be, around, like location preferences and things. If you have any animals, like a cat or a dog you want to bring, all the story. And then we'll bring you some top options based on you individually. We'll talk to you about them and we'll set up tours. We'll go with you on tours and really help you compare the homes apple to apple. The thing is that a lot of people, when they do the search on their own, generally this takes over 80 hours. And so it's essentially equivalent to 2 full-time weeks of work. And some of those people are doing 15 plus tours. So you can imagine everything gets all mushed together. And so our role in your journey is to keep it clean so that you can actually know what the comparison between the homes are, because one home will call something assisted living, the other one will call it something else. One does package care, one does a la carte. At the end of the day, what does our client need, and we're going to sort it for you so that it's comparable as opposed to a bunch of gobbledygook. I hope that answers that. Do I give assistance to looking for retirement homes? Absolutely. I hope I answered that. Okay. If one caregiver is in need to go to a long-term care home, will their partner need to sign the home to the government for security for payments for the couple at long-term care? Not that I'm aware of. So generally speaking, the reason it's so complicated is that, like I said, long-term care is a moving target. HCCS is a moving target. And sometimes it feels as though each decision is a personal decision between caseworkers. Like one caseworker might do something and another caseworker might do differently. And it's really confusing, to say the least. And so essentially the HCCSS will tell you that they don't qualify on finance. And so that's what they tell us, in the city, that it doesn't qualify on finance, which would then allude to the fact that if one partner goes into care, they would qualify based on their care needs. And then if you said, we can only afford basic subsidized care, then my thought process would be, at that point, once you've qualified, but then you say, hey, I need a subsidy, I need to pay less money, then they're going to need to qualify that and see how much income the person's bringing in. It's a really specific question. Again, you've got really great questions tonight. And it's a really specific question because it's a moving target. It's really hard to stay on top of. And so that would be a really good question to direct rate to HCCSS. But again, I'm going to follow up with your other question as well. And so I'll just take a screenshot of this and see what information I can find. Okay, so yeah, and so then one last comment is, lots of people are living on their own. They may not have any family support. They may be dealing with physical or mental things that are holding them back or making it challenging. And so, not to specifically boast for tea and toast, but it's really helpful to have a professional in those matters, because you don't have anybody to bounce it off of. You don't have anybody to talk to about it. And like I said, we do this all day, every day for the last, tea and toast is almost 10, and I've been doing it 20 years. So, it's really important to, have a professional. It's the same thing I'd say to you, if you were downsizing, talk to someone, get a professional opinion. If you're moving, hire movers, right? So it's the same kind of thing with different professionals. So especially if you're on your own, it would be helpful. Okay, Vinny wants to know, how am I paid? By retirement home or by the client? Lump sum or hourly? Okay, great. So we don't operate our business like anyone in Canada, I would say, or maybe anyone in the world. I'm very As things progress in our industry, because it's a very new industry, and Tea and Toast is one of the kind of the founding type of companies in the industry, like we are one of the older ones. Things progress differently. And so what I've chosen to do with our company is that we would prefer retirement homes pay for the service because that helps the clients, and the clients, you know, the families, they need help to figure out what the retirement homes are talking about. And the retirement homes sometimes have made it a bit more confusing. So that partnership works really well in Ottawa. It's not like that across Canada, but in Ottawa, most of our families that move to retirement use our package 1 service, which is our retirement home paid service, which means we make an agreement that we go and do the search for you. You're looking to move. When you move into the home, we invoice the retirement home, and that's it. Our other services, just for your knowledge, is a package 2, which is a family paid service. So I tell you that we work with most of the homes in Ottawa, definitely the most of anybody that is doing our service. And so in that, I would say somewhere around 90 to 95% of homes we're working with in Ottawa anyway. And so package 2 means that either somebody wants to look at one of the specific non-partnered homes, but they want us to help them, and so we'll do that because those homes wouldn't cover our service, our fees. Or they're using a package 2 because they've done a lot of research and they've called so many homes, and it's really difficult for us to jump in then. And so the retirement homes, most often, even if they were partners, because that client has already called them directly, is the retirement homes client, and so therefore they don't work with us the same. So they would fall under package 2 as well. This is all stuff that we can definitely explain for your own individual situations. And then on top of that, we have an eldercare planning service, which is $200, and it really is to come to your place or do it on video and go through a lot of the planning that I did a good amount of it today, but really dig into your own personal situation and educate on that. And then long-term care navigation, we're not the HCCSS. Again, remember I talked about private and public companies. So as a private company, we're able to offer you actual housing suggestions where HCCS can't give you any other insight. Like if they had any insight to the long-term care homes, and if we have it, we can give it to you because we're a private company. And so we do that for our clients as well. We help them choose their top homes for their long-term care list. We educate them on the system. We make sure they get, their referral in and all of that. And that's $400. And that's usually a couple of hours between the few different meetings. And that's kind of all our services, other than the workshop course that you can find at teamtoast.ca. Okay, so like I said, lots of really great questions. So thanks for all of those. Anything else before we end for today? Again, I'll just let you know that if you do want to do a free strategy session and really kind of figure out what your next moves are, if you need a referral, if you need direction, you can either scan this QR code or you can give us a call or send in a booking. There's a calendar app at teamtoast.ca/contact. And then Kayla, our lovely Kayla, our client experience coordinator, will give you a call and give you some direction. All right, last question of the night. Do you rate or rank long-term care homes? I got to tell you, Mary, that is something that's missing in this industry. Really difficult. I promise you I'm working on it. I'm also working on retirement as well, because a lot of families want a rating system. And one family specifically said to me the other day, I can find out on Best Buy how much rating this TV gets, but I can't get a rating for my loved one to go into care. And I said, absolutely. I understand that. So I will tell you, I'm working on it, Mary, but it's a process. And sorry, there's actually one more question here. Average age for going into retirement homes. Most retirement homes don't necessarily have an average age. There's a couple that say 65 plus. I will tell you as well that there's a lot of people that are younger that have a disability or whatnot, and they can't stay on their own, they need something. there's nothing in between is the problem. There's no housing situation specifically for younger seniors or 50-year-olds or 40-year-olds. I've even moved a 30-year-old to a retirement home many years ago. There's no other situation. So there are a lot of people that do move to retirement homes younger when those kinds of needs come up. But again, there's also a strategy for that, because not all retirement homes are suitable for a younger clientele. And remember, if you're that younger clientele, you are moving in with seniors, right? Average age, I don't know, 85. And so there's better homes, there's better retirement homes than others for younger clientele, is what I can say to that. Okay, I think we're done for tonight. Thanks so much for joining me. Like I said, I'll send you an email and get you this copy. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. And please do, if you have ideas or for content or you have questions, please do feel free to reach out. Thanks very much, everyone.